It hit me last night watching Frank Reich's post-game press conference at Soldier Field after his team lost, after the quarterback that Carolina took number 1 overall lost to a quarterback that was taken out of the middle of nowhere in West Virginia, undrafted. And by the way, that team traded you the first overall pick. The look on Frank Reich's face, Tom, was very similar to the look of kind of like hopelessness that I saw on his face last year when trying to decide between Matt Ryan and Sam Ehlinger. Are they in trouble in Carolina?
I would say this, Andrew. I don't think that anybody watching that game is going to walk away saying anything other than the offense is horrible. I mean, it's, whether it's the design, whether it's the execution, whether it's the way the offensive line is played, whether it's the lack of some of the outside weapons. I mean, you're going up against a Bears defense that, granted, added Montez Sweat, and they did invest in that side, but they haven't been a elite unit this season. And you get in the red zone once on national TV, and you got the number 1 overall pick. I just keep going back to this, and this is not to pin it on, solely Frank Reich. It's certainly not to pin it on the offensive coordinator, Thomas Brown, who, let's be honest, when he takes over the play calling a few weeks ago, you're not installing an entirely new offense. You can try to do some different things, but the offense, the structure of the scheme is not going to substantially change in the course of a season here. The number 1 pick looks like he's the guy who was the undrafted rookie out on the field. I don't get the sense that anybody in Carolina is worried about Bryce Young coming through this because he's such a mature guy, a steady guy. But you took him in part because of, the elite processing ability and how accurate he was and how quickly he got the football out. Everything right now just looks slow, and there's no tempo in the offense. You're trying to get the football out of his hands, which I understand, but you're running it's a lot of quick passes. And so you're trying to slowly, gradually move the chains, and that doesn't give you as much margin for error. It's a lot of different factors going on right there in Carolina. Certainly, David Tepper has shown patience in the past. I know that, there's reputations outside and some other things. And I think that he's very conscientious of the fact that people think he's not going to be patient, but he went into a third year with Matt Rule, despite the fact that, at that point, there wasn't a lot of reason to believe, other than Matt Rule's success at the college level in year 3, that things were necessarily headed in the right direction. Here with Frank Reich, we're at the halfway point, Andrew, and we're already having these types of conversations. I would just also go back to when they did their coaching search last year, and you look at the interview list, Frank Reich was an outlier. It was young offensive guys. They, wanted Ben Johnson. They interviewed Kellen Moore. They brought in Ken Dorsey, all these guys. Then you hire Frank Reich, who's just a little bit different from what you necessarily were going after in the first place. And so David Tepper, I'm sure, has had a lot to think about on the plane back from Chicago in terms of exactly what to do moving forward here. Again, I would say nobody is concerned about the quarterback at this point, Andrew, but it's obvious everything around the quarterback is not helping them out.
And there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen there. Jim Caldwell and Josh McCown and Thomas Brown. And on the defensive side, Ejiro Evero. You have a lot of guys that are considered future head coaches, and you have former head coaches there as well. I remember sitting with Frank Reich at the Combine. We're doing the interview on NFL Network, and I asked that very question. Are there too many cooks in the kitchen? He pushed back a little bit. There are people seemingly in that building that should be able to come up with answers. But, Tom, there's got to be, and no one's suggesting that I think Bryce Young will pull through. But the C.J. Stroud factor here has to cloud people's thinking, doesn't it?
Well, I think that the dichotomy certainly weighs on you just based upon a relatively small sample size of results. I mean, I think that you go back to the first couple of years coming out of the 2020 draft, and everybody looked at it as the Dolphins completely missed. How in the world could they take Tua? Why didn't they take Justin Herbert? And certainly Justin Herbert's been a really good player.
It's
and
a great point.
Got paid. There's a lot of reasons to believe in him. But Tua has shown that he can perform at a pretty high level when he's healthy and able to stay on the field. But they had to make a coaching change in order to do that. And they brought in Mike McDaniel, and it kind of unlocked this whole thing for Tua Tagovailoa. And we've seen him certainly at the start of this season. I know that the last few weeks have been a little more of a battle for the Dolphins offense, but we've seen that he can do it. So I think that it's way too soon to say how in the world could you take this guy? The Panthers did all kinds of studies, and they had data and analytics, and they traveled around to the different teams or different schools, and they met with everybody, and they spent time with them. They went to dinner with Bryce Young, and they talked to him there, and everything about him lined up, and they were not alone in that. It's not as if they took the guy that nobody else had as the number one quarterback. If you talk to people within the league, you did get different opinions on this quarterback class, but the consensus, I would say, if not a strong consensus, was Bryce Young was the safest bet. What's happening right now is not working. To your point on the too many cooks in the kitchen, I don't think it's bad to have too many smart football people. The last thing you want is a brain drain and the head coach having to do everything. I do go back to remember the last year for Doug Peterson in Philadelphia, a few years after they had won the Super Bowl. And at that time, Frank had left for Indianapolis. They had moved on from Mike Groh. And then they brought in, some smart football minds, Marty Morningweg, Rich Scangarello. They were from different backgrounds. And thinking was, okay, we're going to get some new ideas going here. We're kind of going to revitalize this offense. And instead, they kind of had this offense that didn't really have an identity, didn't have a philosophy. And I think that you see that a little bit right now with Carolina, too, where you've got a lot of smart football people. You just rattled off a bunch of the names in that room, but they come from different backgrounds. They might have different philosophies about what it's supposed to look like on the field. And so regardless of who's calling the plays, the structure of this thing right now looks like it's not best suited for what's going to help Bryce Young.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.